blackboard or not. We didn't ask how much it was used. Now, what Ontario has done, it's the only province that's done that, and the ministry did a survey in 2010 of every institution and asked how many students were online and how many course enrollments they had that were fully online. And they didn't do blended or hybrid, just fully online. 15% of all students in Ontario were fully online, were doing studies fully online. Now, that doesn't mean to say that 15% were completely online, but 15% of students of all the enrollments were online. And that's been growing steadily.
No, I think your talk presentation was very interesting. Raises a lot of pertinent issues for us. The other part of it, of course, is infrastructure or issues.
Yep.
You know, we need the equipment in the rooms to be able
Yep.
to use and access.
Yep.
And if I could just ask one more thing, just about blended delivery. I'm just thinking about, you know, how, like, we already deal with a certain amount of getting students in the classroom on time and here every day and all of that. If you have a blended delivery mode, like, how does that work? Are there successful programs that combine that? And do they have a choice about if they come or don't come? You know, those kinds of questions.
Let me be clear, are you talking about blended or hybrid? Blended being adding on to the classroom but not reducing the classroom time.
Maybe it's hybrid.
Hybrid, yeah.
Flex.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing about blended. When you add it on, you have to look at the student workload and yours, because what happens, you start adding stuff to the classroom teaching, and the first year it's all right, then the second year you keep that stuff and then you add some more stuff, and eventually the student's doing more and more work.
Right.
And so are you, actually. Whereas hybrid, you're actually saying, wait a minute, what's the best way to use my time? What's the best way for the students to use their time? And then how do I design around that? And that's a different kind of question. And I don't have an easy answer about what that will be, but I think that's where the future is going to be. The big question for me is not about what should we do online, but why would a student, what are the benefits a student will get from coming on campus and interacting in a face-to-face manner, or maybe there are other things like using labs and so on, that they can't do online. So it's really flipping the question on its head, not what should I be doing online, we can do most things online. What do we really need the students on campus for? What is the experience we're giving them on campus? Is it rich enough to make it worth their while to come? And are we doing something that will be really difficult to do online?
Can I just add a word to that? Your question reminds me that one of the things that we're pushed to consider is what we might call new rules of conduct. You know, very few of us in this room, and we don't have to go back very far, very few of us in this room consumed higher education with the kinds of models that Tony's talking about in terms of, for example, showing up or not showing up. You know, I think about the professional hockey metaphor of optional skate. You know, most of us actually didn't get offered optional skates. Now, we interpreted it that way, but we knew we were breaking some kind of either written or unwritten rule if we decided, no, I don't think I'll go. The idea that, no, there are no rules, there are no real expectations around that, is disquieting for some of us. And nowhere does this play out more thoroughly than when we get people together face to face and actually people bury themselves behind screens. So I come to Tony's point about, well, how are we going to use this valuable time if in fact you are not treating it as face to face? Now, you can approach that in one of two ways. One of them is to say, well, logically, we're not using our time and our technology well. This is redundant. You're doing online work when we've actually taken the time to come together and burn the gas to do so. But to come back to a couple of things I'm thinking about a lot in terms of identity, very few people, when they complain about students having laptop screens open, for example, face-to-face, say, this is an inefficient use of online time. Yeah. They say, that's an insult to me as a person. And my other students in class call it a distraction because they're playing poker. Yeah. And I don't know how to stop them from playing poker. It becomes about rules of conduct. Whereas if we follow Tony's model and think really carefully about well, or at least adopt the view that face-to-face time is very valuable. We think a little bit more about how we're going to use it so that poker is less likely to be a viable option. That's so much easier to say than do.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Please.
What's the resistance level like for the learner in terms of kind of this hybrid and the online learning? Because 65% of the population I teach is your older, mature students who already struggle with technology to begin with. They, are almost in tears when they have to type me a scholarly paper. So to kind of go from your everyday, you teach me what I need to learn in the classroom to go fetch the information yourself, what's the resistance level like from the learner point of view?
Very high, because what you're doing is moving into a model of learning that they're not familiar with, and that's why this program planning, I think, is really, really important, where you gradually introduce them to online study in a safe, secure environment that they're comfortable with.
How do you create that buy-in?
Yeah.
I think we have to link it to assessment. What drives most student behaviour is assessment. In terms of learning, there are other things that drive their behaviour. But in terms of learning, then, for instance, I remember when UBC first went to problem-based learning in the Faculty of Medicine. And the first year, they didn't change the exam. And it was all based on reproducing content. And the students rebelled. They said, we spent the whole year learning how to solve problems, and then you assess us on something different. Right? So assessment drives their behaviour. So there's no problem getting these mature students in that eTech 522 course to do a video pitch, because they know that's the assessment. That's what they're going to have to do to get through the grade. And so, yes, it took a little bit of a shock when they first came into the course that they were going to have to do that. But when they saw that that's what the assessment is, and it's very relevant to what I'm going to have to do when I leave, then that's the motivation for doing it. But I think this is a graduate program. It's easier to do in a graduate program than in a two-year college program. And therefore, you've got to start slowly and bit by bit with the students as well as with the faculty, even more so with the students.
can I, so the notion of making sure your extrinsic motivators are aligned with what you want them to do leads us to using appropriate assessment. I'm flattered by the thought that it was only 1 year that UBC used inappropriate assessments following PBL. Because that was introduced in about 1996, and I can tell you we're still, anyway. But there's another piece here that's well worth considering, great fun to consider, but also a little daunting, and that is how students think learning works. And in addition to that, what they think our job is and their job is in that process of how learning works. Tony talks about hybrid models and other models where we shift responsibility to the learner. There is a lot of good learning theory to indicate that's an excellent thing to do. And in so doing, students will get more out of their education when we do that. That is not necessarily in line with how students think learning works, and I don't care how old they are.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example from my teaching, which is a graduate class, master's and PhD students in population and public health. These people are like 1 in 50 get in, and these are sort of cream of the crop kinds of people. And I teach a course along with another colleague called Research in Progress. Partly it's so that students can get up and learn how to present where they are in their research and get feedback on it from colleagues and from us. That's straightforward. But that doesn't take all the time. We've got more class time. And the students said to us a couple of years ago, we need to use this valuable face-to-face time in ways that help us get more out of graduate school, because it's not happening anywhere. We show up, we're expected to know how learning works and how to get more out of graduate school. We introduced the notion of student-led learning sessions in which we ask the students, what do you need to know? And who knows it? Well, again, it's a rich class, although I would argue that we underestimate the richness of all classes. So the fact that this is a graduate program, I don't think necessarily limits how generalizable it is. So what we need to know? We need to know how to manage referencing in our papers and in our research in online environments. Anybody here know how to do that? Some hands went up. We had 4 10-minute presentations on Mendeley, that's the one that I've now adopted, and a series of other ways of managing referencing. This is bibliographic referencing, not to mention finding those references, online, student-led. Now the question became, Gary, what are you and Charlene doing? Coming to Tony's first option, Brown, is it Brown? No, and Siemens, what's the first guy's last name? No, his last
Stephen Downs?
Downs, thank you. That were not really needed. There are political, and I'll be blunt, career-based reasons why we need to be able to answer that question in a modern higher education system. Because if our students think they don't need us, they will put that in evaluations. And we can't tolerate that in our careers. And also, it's a good question. Never mind whether it's about our careers. So we are now being more deliberate and more overt about the role we are playing in that process. That, to me, is as much about buy-in as anything.
Just wondering, so what's kind of not a small question, but whether or not you think high schools prepare students in ways that make them ready for the kinds of qualities that are required for independent, distance learners. Whose responsibility is to prepare kids for the technology?
Yeah, I think I'll have a first stab if that's okay, Tony. I spent the first 6 years of my working life teaching high school, public school. My wife spent 35 years at it. I've had a few seminars on the topic. Good ones, good ones. And when we talk about school like high school preparation, we use that as an example. We tend to think about, have they picked up the skills? Tony talked to us about skills. Can they write? Do they have some sense of numeracy? That sort of thing. I become more interested now in those beliefs about how learning works. We know that our failure rates in UBC science courses, especially second year and third year, less so first year, but especially second year and third year, have been unacceptably high. They're coming down because some people, Joanne Nakanekni and a few others at UBC, have done research on why all of a sudden failure rates in second year science courses start to hover around a third at times. I mean, these are staggeringly high. As I say, they've come down, cut almost in half now. The answer wasn't because these students didn't bring the right skills. It's because they didn't know what it meant to do science the way we do it at a university. It wasn't about memorizing the parts of a plant, although that was part of it. It was much more about why things work, how they work, process related, knowing how to ask questions, how to hypothesize. And I'm not going to put all of the responsibility for that on the schools that come before us. I think we're very good at passing the buck in higher education. We have been for decades. It's so convenient to do, as my wife reminded me, once or twice a week. And with good reason.
I think that your question's a really good one. I think it's tougher for the universities than it is for the colleges. I think colleges are a bit like the hospital system. You're in triage. You take them as they are, and you have to deal with them. You don't go into the, have they been taking drugs when they got beaten up last night? I mean, you deal with them as they are. And that's why I say you have to have a clear view about where you want to take them from where they are. And different students will need different routes to that because some need a lot more help than others do. So I think that's the challenge for us as teachers. Can we make technology enable us to provide that more individual approach to learning? And I think we can. It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. And I think that taking students as they are and with the skills and expectations they come with, and then saying, okay, well that's where you are, but this is where we're going. This is my expectations of what you have to do, and that's why you're here, because you'll get a better job as a result, or whatever motivation you can give them. Then I think that's what we have to do. Easier said than done again.
One last question.
Well, I'm just gonna thank everybody for coming. I have a little bit of a little thank you note for Carrie and one for Tony. We really appreciate you taking the time to come here.
What do you use these for?
You choose. Tattoo your hand. Exactly. I want to thank BC Campus for their support promoting this event, for tweeting, for helping us get out there to the rest of British Columbia. UMBC Grant Potter for helping us use their radio tweeting channel, and all of you for coming. And I hope that we can keep reflecting and having the courage to take the technology and adapt with it. And thank you again. That was very revealing, and your work was very powerful. Thank you. Thank you.